Hi, I'm Tiffy McKay from Awkward Paws Publishing, here with author Grant Uchida and first-time illustrator Celina Dahl. Thank you so much for joining us today in celebration of Little Jack of All Trades coming to paperback. For those of you who aren't familiar with Little Jack of All Trades, here's a little bit about the book. Little Jack is the best at learning new things, but will his friendships survive when bragging becomes his new favorite hobby? Fed up with his boasting, Jack's friends teach him a new lesson. Will Jack figure out his mistake in time to save his friendships? Is there a better way to use his many skills when it comes to his friends? Little Jack of All Trades is the second book in the universe of the rhyming picture book Soon Kitty. Author Grant Uchida and illustrator Celina Dahl combined forces in this adorable children's tale of helping others. Welcome today, you guys. How are you doing?
Hi.
Hi. We're good.
We're doing great.
Thanks for having us.
Yes, thank you.
They are joining us from Honolulu, Hawaii, and I'm coming to you from Connecticut. I was wondering, I know this is Grant's second book, and this is Celina's first. How do each of you feel about Grant, your second book, and Celina, your first? What's that like?
You want to go first?
You go ahead.
Okay. For this one, it definitely did have a different feel. It was a good feeling, though, because I felt like this one was a lot more true to a message that I wanted to portray. I know that the first one was very experimental with getting it done. What the methods were to go about actually publishing it, advertising it, and all that. But I feel like with the second one, we had a little more of a game plan, and I do feel that this one is a lot more personal. So it felt a lot more closer to my heart than the other one did.
I could definitely see that, given the main character, seems to have a resemblance. Yes, it seems to have
portrayed as me.
Similar resemblance to someone we know.
Yeah, I don't know who that
Which is adorable, by the way.
Yeah, Celina did a good job on that.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
And Celina, how about you?
So this was, like you said, my first book. The first time I've done anything like this. So it was all new to me. I was so happy to have you and Grant here, with a little more experience, kind of helping me along. But it was definitely a big undertaking for me. And, I grew to really love the characters and the story. And so it's just, it's very special to me. And I'm glad to say that I was able to do this, at the end of the day with the help of you guys. So, yeah, it was amazing.
Not many people can say that they fully illustrated a children's book.
Oh, my gosh. Yep.
Yeah. And you mentioned that, this was a big undertaking. Do you know, roughly how much time it took to get the book done? Because I know I stepped in at a certain point. But you guys had been working on this before we met.
Mm-hmm.
A little bit, yeah.
I think that weren't we still working on it while I was getting the first book done?
Yeah.
I don't even remember.
Yeah.
The timeline is so fuzzy to me because it's I don't know officially where it started. I mean, obviously I know where it ended, but so I don't know. I keep thinking in my mind roughly 2 years in total. Is that
I think
right,
that
no?
I always say 2 years,
Yeah.
but I also think that it might have been longer just because we were playing around with the idea for quite some time.
Yeah, that's why I say it's I don't know where it began officially, but
I just know that I was working on it with you while we were still working on Soon Kitty, which is the first book.
Okay.
At that time, I think that I was still or we were still coming up with the designs for the characters.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't meet up as often as I did with the previous book, so it definitely took a lot longer to work on.
Right.
But yeah, once Tiffy stepped in, that's when she got everything a little more organized
She
for us.
brought the structure to this craziness. So thank you, Tiffy.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, my pleasure. I thoroughly enjoy working with both of you. It's fantastic. Aww. I love it. I think on my end, I want to say because you had already done, you guys had been working on like the character designs and everything a long time ago, but then you already had like the sketch phase done basically right about when I had stepped in and started working with you. And I think it took like a year and a half from that point, I want to say. I think you and I were doing meetings for about a year and a half to get the rest of it done. So, but yeah, like that's pretty average for what do you call that?
A children's
The
book?
illustration side of picture books, because it takes so much more time than anybody realizes out there. I definitely run into a lot of people who are like, so where's the book already? And it's kind of comical because I'm like, you have no idea how long it takes to do this.
Yeah.
Plus, like, throw in life, and you just have...
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, because most people have
Like-
another job.
Yes.
Yeah. So you were working like full time, I think, during a lot of this too, weren't you?
Yeah. Working and,
Yeah.
you know, other things just in everyday life, you know, everything life throws at you. So it was a lot, like, not gonna lie, it was a lot. But now I feel like, me personally, I have a better idea of what it takes and maybe how much time it takes, because I think I also underestimated how long everything would take. But so if we were to do something like this again, I think now I know what I need to do on my end to better organize myself and, you know, help you guys out. So
Absolutely.
to make this go smoothly and efficiently, because it's
Yeah. Yeah, that is like, it's a huge perspective shift after completing like a massive project like this.
yeah.
Yeah, and it's really common for people who haven't done this before to underestimate the time. In fact, that really goes for any major project that people work on. We all tend to underestimate how much time it'll take,
Right.
how much effort, but if you can make it to the end, it's always worth it.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
I believe so.
Definitely.
I am a little bit curious, Celina, if you've ever worked on any other kinds of major projects that gave you a potential glimpse into, like, the long haul kind of project, or was this just your first time doing any kind of major project?
Yeah, this was my first time. Up until now, this book, I've been drawing like pretty much all my life, but it's been for me, for myself, and, you know, maybe for friends and family here and there, but it's just been a hobby. And it still is a hobby,
Yeah.
but I've never done anything on this scale before that other people will see and that will just be put out into the world like that. So, yeah, it's definitely, I've never done this before. So, yeah.
Awesome, and kudos to you again for completing this kind of massive project. As your publisher, I'm so proud of you. I can't even put it into words.
Thank you. It was all of us.
I know a lot of these questions are geared a little bit more heavily towards Celina,
That's
because this is our first time getting to know Celina. I'm gonna ask like a kind of a grouped question,
Okay.
but feel free to take it on any direction you'd like to for this one, Celina.
Okay.
What was it like working on a project that stretched over years worth of time? How did you get through it? What kept you going? And are there any like specific suggestions that you could give to somebody walking through like a marathon kind of project like this?
Go ahead.
Me? I would say don't focus so much on the end result, but more or less the process, because
Yeah.
a lot of the things that I've done that took an awful amount of time, if you look at how far you have to go, that's where you get discouraged, because you see it as like a giant milestone that is almost unobtainable at first glance. But it's just like anything, like learning how to ride a bike, learning how to do, learning how to drive.
Yeah.
You're not going to be able to get it perfectly, and it is also a very daunting task. But over time, it becomes less and less strenuous. It becomes less and less scary, and before you know it, you'll hit your destination.
Yes. Very true. I agree. Yeah. It's really hard to like go through each day, and then some days you don't really see progress, or you don't see as much progress as you would hope to see, and it's hard to even see the ending when you're just inching by so slowly. Stuff like that I was thinking about. But so yeah, I agree with Grant. Like, don't focus so much on the ending, because it's the process. It's the everyday not struggle, but it's the everyday hard work that you put in that eventually makes the ending naturally, organically just come to be. And just focus on what you can do now with the things that you have. Yeah. I mean, that's the most important, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I think what both of you have said is it's really well spoken, because I know to get things done, we definitely relied heavily on process and having like mini milestones along the way, little benchmarks, to keep us kind of motivated for still getting some sort of achievement along the way, without having to be like, well, it's not done yet, so I can't celebrate yet. Also, you're not wrong though when you say the word like struggle, because there are times where when you go through a project like this, you're going to struggle, because you're growing, and it's just like a normal part of human experience. And struggle's not necessarily a bad thing, as long as you're able to keep getting back up,
Right, and
keep going forward.
No pain, no gain.
Very true. Very true.
I think the hardest thing is the days when you don't want to do it. Because especially for me, like I usually have a pretty strong work ethic, but there are a lot of times where I'm just like, I don't feel like doing this today, and you kind of have to force yourself to do at least 10 minutes of it. I think that those are the days that really count, because I've learned that once you break that habit of doing it consistently,
don't break the chain.
Exactly. It becomes twice as hard to get back on the boat and keep rowing.
Yeah. And then there's also the thing where, breaks are important as well, because, if you feel like you're burning out, if you just keep pushing yourself, you're just going to just really burn out. And so it's a fine line between like balancing your breaks and just kind of, balancing your breaks versus taking too many breaks, and then it's just eventually falling out of that chain that you've created. Yeah. So it's harder than it sounds, but it's just little things like that.
Taking calculated breaks is what's important.
And also, Tiffy, like you said, celebrating the little things, I think, keeps the motivation and the drive going too. Because if you just, you keep going and you're just focusing on what you didn't do rather than focusing on how far you've come, then it just doesn't help your mental state. Yeah, because it's a lot harder to motivate yourself if you're getting down on yourself and depressed about it, rather than cheering yourself on and knowing that because you've already gotten this portion done, you're capable of doing the next portion. Yeah, and that's where it's good to have a good like team, right? That will support you and like remind you of how far you've come already. So. That's important.
Oh, that's so true.
Having other people to hold each other accountable to move forward together, I think, is one of the most important things to have. And a lot of times I've been so used to doing things on my own that I don't even realize when I'm going too far with my work. A lot of sacrifices were made for hangouts and all that just so that I can get things done, only to find out that a lot of it would have been more productive if I had just like stopped doing it for a little bit, enjoyed myself, and then come back into it.
Yeah, come back with
Yeah.
like fresh eyes and a fresh mind.
Yeah,
So,
right.
Yep. It's important.
Nice. I'm kind of curious about this aspect, and feel free to answer whatever you're comfortable with. In the middle of this project, Celina, you discovered that you have ADHD, didn't you?
Oh, wow.
How did that knowledge affect the way you saw yourself and your work, or the way you worked? What was it like finding out that you're like, oh, okay, this has been, like, was it like getting like an answer to like why something may have felt hard, or like, I don't know, what was it like? Like finding out.
I know, that's
that
a
you're
loaded
like, I definitely have it.
But yeah, no, I mean, I'm still figuring things out because it's really good, you know, to have a name for something that has been like very hard for me for like my whole life, that I didn't even realize was hard until I look at other people and I'm like, hey, how come this isn't hard for you? But it's hard for me, you know, like the little things. But yeah, that was definitely a like revelation in my life to find out that. I mean, I suspected it because I was noticing certain things were very difficult for me that shouldn't be difficult. And so seeking out my diagnosis and finally getting it, it helps me to treat what needs to be treated. And yeah, I think it was overwhelming in the beginning because I was trying to understand myself more and understand what ADHD is, which honestly there's so much that goes into it that I didn't even realize. But yeah, it affects like everyday life, time management, motivation, all of those things. Makes it so difficult sometimes, and it makes like what I was talking about, balancing breaks, burning out, you know, things like that. It makes it that much more important for me. So I think what my struggle was during this process was figuring out the balance and not knowing how much of a break I should take versus how much work I should do in like one day. And I'm still very much learning how to do that stuff. So yeah, that was the biggest struggle, balancing time, I guess, and breaks. But you know, at the end of the day, this really helped me. This whole process really helped me to, like I mentioned before, know what I need to do better and how I can support the team better. So, yeah, if that makes sense. It's just a whole learning process. I don't know.
And while we're on the topic of ADHD, this was something that I had no idea about while we were working on the book together. But I found out just a short few months ago that apparently I very likely also have ADHD.
Yeah, you were mentioning that.
And I've been learning about ADHD, and there is tons of information out there, and a lot of it is things that like we've been either misinformed about, or just that information wasn't out there when we were younger. And we just have access to so many resources now and so many other people that we can talk to and learn, like, hey, what do you struggle with? Like, how do you deal with it? And it's been really helpful. Just looking those things up. So I found it interesting because I'm kind of like, when you came up, you know, one day with it and said, you know, hey, just so you know, this I just got diagnosed with this, and I remember thinking like, oh, okay, that's no problem. Like, it didn't matter to me
Sure, it's
whatsoever.
not a problem.
It wasn't. But like in my mind, it's really funny looking back though, because now I'm just like, no wonder we get along so well, because a lot of times people with ADHD understand other people with ADHD very well without having to even really talk about it.
And then Grant's just here like.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Honestly, I don't know
No,
if I have
don't.
ADHD too. I know that like I get easily distracted. That's why, but I don't know if it's because I'm looking for a creative outlet. I remember in elementary school, I've actually never mentioned this before, but I was obsessed with like drawing comics, and so instead of doing the work, I was constantly drawing my comics and all that, and I wouldn't be paying attention. My mind would always be wandering and thinking about that, and I actually got held back a year because I wasn't able to keep up with the work.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know
That's
that.
something that
I don't
I'll
think I knew
broadcast
that.
this exclusive. I don't tell anybody that, but
Wow, thank you for sharing
Yeah.
that.
this is world breaking news right here. But no, like it was always a case where it was around the time when I started to also realize that I couldn't see the board that well. So,
Yes.
but I do remember
Oh.
that like a lot of times, you know, like whenever you watch like those comics or cartoons of like kids kind of like daydreaming off and they're in like a jungle fighting a tiger or something like that.
Yeah.
That was
Are you talking
like
about Calvin and Hobbes?
something like that. Yeah, Calvin and Hobbes. There's this other, I forgot what it was. There's this other like cartoon. I think it was on like I think it was on Warner Brothers. But it was like a kid who or maybe it was like a Mickey Mouse cartoon where a kid
okay.
would like he would look at the letter I and then that would turn into like a rifle and the dot would turn into ammunition and he would be like firing a gun and then he realized he's in class just doing this. But I don't know, that cartoon stuck with me and I realized like a lot of times I would be thinking about making my own comics and all that while the class is going on.
Okay.
And
okay.
even like my entire garage is set up to the point if I get bored on one thing, I literally have to swivel my chair around and there's something else for me to do. So whether or not I have ADHD, I know that I get easily distracted. So I've structured my workspace in a way that I can never get bored doing one thing.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I if I do, I've learned to deal with it in that aspect.
That's good. I mean, that's definitely an ADHD.
Yeah, I mean,
like,
like, look at my garage. It's, like, literally, like, all over the place.
Not to say that you haven't, but that does sound familiar.
It's
But yeah.
And it's interesting too, because like for our generation, for millennials, most of us that may or like there are a lot of us out there who don't know that we have ADHD because
Especially women.
especially
Yes.
women, because it tends to present differently. But they only diagnosed kids back in our generation if they were disruptive.
Yep.
So if you were on the inattentive side where you just weren't paying attention, they were like, well, whatever, they're just not paying attention. Like, they didn't consider it disruptive, so it wasn't a problem, so they didn't drag you out to these places to get diagnosed and things.
Yeah.
So there are tons of people in our generation that have no idea what they may or may not have been struggling with.
Can I just say something? So
Yeah.
in school, I've always been a really good student and I would get like really good grades. But once I started going to like high school, my grades would slip. And so my teachers would say, oh, she's just lazy. And so I started
yeah.
hearing that word a lot, lazy. And, you know, of course, first of all, that's a hit to the self-esteem. But then you kind of internalize that. And so now, knowing that it's not just laziness, right? There's more to it. I've noticed that sometimes I question myself and I'm like, am I really just lazy? So I just wanted to mention that it's like, you know, it's
Oh my God.
it's
yes.
interesting because people don't understand what else could this mean? Like, is it just laziness? Is there more to it? You know, and then so they just throw that word around, lazy, and not realizing like how that can really affect someone. And so,
Oh yeah.
yeah, it's
And
yeah.
I've heard that a lot from other people who I talk to that have been diagnosed with ADHD, that like the same thing happened to them. Lots of people were like, every teacher, whenever they weren't getting it or
Yeah.
weren't keeping up, it was just, oh, you're just lazy. And it's like,
Right.
what?
And it's
That's a lazy answer.
exactly.
I'd like to point that
They're
out.
lazy. No, that's very true. And yeah.
And I totally had those struggles throughout school too. Less with hearing externally that I was lazy, and more just my grades would be up and down.
Right.
And like if I was invested, I had straight A's, and if I didn't
Exactly.
care, then it was like F's.
Exactly.
And they would average out to maybe a C or something. But like
I think there are ways to decipher the difference between being lazy and just not being interested in a subject. Because I know
yeah.
I was always trying to get straight A's. Like, I was not the brightest kid in class. History was my worst subject. But I do remember I would try really hard in middle school. And I think once I got to high school, that's where my grades started to slip, because I was also in theater. And it was something that I found out that
Oh.
I was good at. And I know that, like, I would always like joke around and say an A is an A, but a D is still passing. And like, and it's funny because I actually rigged the system where a lot of my grades would be like, theater I'd get an A, and then like other classes I get like C's, C, D, and all that, and so it'd lower my GPA. But someone told me that if you need to have a high enough GPA in case you want to get into college. So during my senior year, I took all theater classes. So I took theater tech, theater, whatever that level was, like chorus and all that, dance. So I got like 4 A's,
Yeah.
and maybe like 1 C,
Yes.
and it skyrocketed my GPA up at the very last second.
Yeah.
But for anyone who said that I was lazy, I literally learned how to backflip after practicing for 2 years in the auditorium, using a tumbling mat. I don't think the teachers knew that I was doing that. But I would go there after lunch, I'd eat, and then I would just keep practicing over and over and over on the stage because that was my playground. And I taught myself how to do that, and they would utilize that within the play. So it was something that I was super
Nice.
determined, and this was before the internet had tutorial videos, so I was literally in the dark learning how to backflip.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was one of my greatest feats back in high school, but it's one thing that I know that the only other people who could do it were cheerleaders, but they literally had like people telling them how to do it. And here I am just kind of like doing it myself.
Did you hurt yourself?
Surprisingly, no. Like I didn't have great form
lucky.
doing it, but I definitely had the drive to learn how to do it.
Yep.
And I remember I was just doing like round off cartwheels for like the entire first year that I tried it. And then once I kind of got enough momentum, one day I just, without thinking, my legs just flipped over me. So I learned how to do it almost just by repetition and by accident. But it was literally just because I found an interest in that, and I had like laser focus on it every day.
Yeah, and that's another thing that people with ADHD tend to be very good at. Like when you find something you're really interested in, you kind of fixate it in on it, and you become like hyper focused. And that's the comic book writing and drawing. I'm like, it just strikes a chord there too. But it, in some ways, like that hyper focus can be like a superpower that other people have a hard time for, which also makes, like, it brings in what Celina was talking about knowing when you should probably take a break, maybe setting a timer or something. So you guys have had some downtime since we finished the book and since the hardcover was published. What has that downtime been like for each of you? Yeah.
Okay, so it's been a few months. Honestly, I've I was just telling Grant this. Like, I haven't really been creating anything, like whether it be crafts, because I do like resin stuff, or drawing. I haven't drawn anything since, but I've been just kind of living life. This whole pandemic thing has kind of like been getting worse here in Hawaii and pretty much everywhere, right?
Yeah.
So it's been like, that's been a thing. I've just been working, carrying on. But yeah, I'm starting to get back into things, into creating something, potentially. A new project has started for me. But yeah, exciting.
Ooh, more questions on that soon. So you found yourself in the taking a creative break, let the creativity kind of like rest, and before you start a new cycle of doing another project.
Yeah.
Which I think is healthy.
No, it really is, and I never realized it, but the other day I just which is when this little project of mine like popped into my head. I just randomly picked up my Apple Pencil and I draw on my iPad Pro, and I just started sketching something, and then I just like felt like joy. It's like
Yes.
I was like, wow, this makes me so happy, and I was like, I never realized how much I love drawing until I took that break, until after all this book was published and everything. And I kind of like did a restart and getting back into it, and I'm like, oh my god, this like brings up a whole new excitement again and like joy to be creating. So I'm gonna use that motivation and try to push stuff out. So yeah.
Awesome.
That's good.
I can relate to that feeling too. The first time I took an art class in maybe like a decade or more, it was like euphoria, and it was just, I had not expected that, and I literally remember like finding myself like in tears because of how happy I was. I was like, with just like happy tears of like, oh my god, I missed you, like
Right, and it's like, how lucky are we to have found something that we enjoy that much, right? Because not everyone has hobbies at all. Like some people don't even have hobbies, and so it's like,
God, what is that like?
I know. It's just like,
I think too, it's not only just hobbies, but more or less passion.
well, yeah,
Yeah. Like,
Yes,
That's the word.
yes.
yeah. Yeah, because I talk to a lot of people, and nowadays a lot of people, especially when they post on like Instagram and all that, a lot of them look for validation in likes, in comments, in how good they look with a filter. You know, like I there's this one trend, I don't know if you've seen it, but it's like this one guy is playing like a Justin Bieber song, and he's like a wedding photographer. But I guess this famous like TikToker or something hit him up, and he made like a really quick like drone video with her, and he's just like dancing like this with her. And then everybody sees that video and they literally copy his format, and then they do the same thing, just not as good.
Okay.
But it's literally just getting them likes and views and all that. And it's one of those things where I feel like nowadays so many people look for validation in likes and views and other people that they're not necessarily creating for themselves.
right.
And I took a step back recently from YouTube. I think I haven't posted in like 5 months or 4 months.
Wow.
But I have been hard at work at just making things for me and learning things that I've wanted to learn for the past like 5-7 years that I never got a chance to because I'm so focused on making things for other people. And
Yes.
I think that if I were never to be heard of again, you know, like the history that I put on my YouTube channel along with these 2 books is enough. But like when they find me And when they look at my art space, they're going to see that there's mountains and mountains and mountains of things that have yet to be released or will never be released. And I think that that's the most important thing about art, is that it doesn't have to be seen by everyone, but it means something to the person who created it.
Right. Very well said.
Thank you.
Indeed. And then that always gives me joy, because then I know later on I can always be like, hey, Grant, you remember this book that you wrote? I found someone to illustrate it. Don't worry about it. It's just going to get done in the background. You keep doing you.
Yeah. Cause like I said, I already have like 12 stories already written. It's crazy. I'll just give it all to you, and then I'll be like, do what you want with it. I don't care.
I'm pretty sure that's what's going to end up happening anyway.
Yeah,
it might take us a year or two to get to that point, but like, I could definitely see that happening down the road. That's the joys of having a team to work on something rather than you being the only one responsible for getting everything done. I'm curious, what comes next for each of you? Is there a next project that you hope to achieve, or a series of smaller projects that got pushed aside while working on this one that you're working on?
You wanna go
first.
Me? Okay. Well, I have been heavily working on learning how to produce music. I've been teaching myself how to play the piano, and I've just been writing songs nonstop. I think that I have enough material for about 3 albums. And yeah,
Oh, wow.
so I have a lot of stuff. One of them actually being the cosplay album that I've been meaning to make for the past like 7 years.
Yep.
And the thing too is like, there's that saying, like, if you want it done right, you got to do it yourself. So I think that there is a point where you need to rely on people to help you, but at an opposite spectrum, only you really know what it is that you truly need to do. And in this case, I think that I take it into my own hands to learn how to do what I'm already excelling at. But yeah, I foresee this as being a 2 to 3 year long project, followed by a big reveal at the very end.
Oh, I like that. I like that a lot.
Wow. That sounds fun.
And music has always been another one of your really big passions.
Yes.
Too, right? So it feeds that inner soul part of you. It's not really so much even just about like whether or not you're relying on other people, but even like on a more deeper level, it's you need to do this for yourself. I think.
And I tell people too, like, because I know that a lot of people listen to modern day music, and I'm sure that like people back in the day would say that their modern day music was bad, and so I'm not gonna say that modern day music is bad, but I've learned, I feel like there's been a huge shift in the reason for making music, and a good example would be the song American Pie. Bye bye Miss American Pie. That, like, a lot of people don't even know what it truly means or what it's really about. Spoiler alert, it's about Buddy Holly, Richie Valens, and the Big Bopper when they ended up crashing in their plane. That's why they talk about the day the music died. That was the headline in the newspaper. So people don't even realize that they're singing about an important, crucial part of history. But every time they contribute to singing it, they're keeping that history alive. I don't necessarily foresee that with a lot of music today. And I think that as an artist, it is very important to convey information in ways that are almost mysterious. For the people who really want to see what the meaning is, they will be the ones to seek it out. Because I feel like a lot of the older songs have subtle hints of like things that have happened back in their time. And it's our job to kind of decipher it and figure out what it really means. Yeah. I don't see too much of that with music of today. When,
Oh, sorry.
No.
I feel like with today's music, I feel like the ones that have the most impact or have the biggest, that get the most get the most viral
Mm-hmm.
are just the ones with the shock value.
Yeah. They have the catchy chorus.
Or like even like the lyrics and the music videos, because like I'm thinking of like certain songs by Cardi B and Megan Thee
Oh yeah,
Stallion,
that. Mm-hmm.
and like even the artist Lil Nas X,
Mm-hmm.
like their songs, like the music, the visuals, and the lyrics are so shocking and like pushing the envelope, or like through the envelope already. Like it's just that, and it's like, okay, I see how it's changing culture, or maybe it could be representing certain things that could be represented more in society. But I don't know, then I question, like, is it the most effective way to portray certain things? I don't know. I have questions. I don't know. I don't know. Just want, yeah.
Well, that is an interesting thing to bring up, because that's something that, like you brought up, basically like timestamps, like that are woven throughout creative works. And this happens a lot with books, where culture is stamped on a book of that time period, like when it was written. For instance, there's like a lot of controversy over Dr. Seuss now, and it's because of the culture stamp from back, what was culturally acceptable then, what's not now. And a lot of times you can read a novel that was written, for instance, like in the 90s, and you're like, wow, that literally screams 90s culture.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, because even when people don't mean to, there is like a culture stamped onto whatever they're producing.
And I'm
whether it's a good side or a bad side or whatever, but it is what it is.
And I'm sure that in like 50, 60 years, maybe even less than that, our current culture of whatever we have there will be some problems with, what people are doing and what people are saying and what people are believing. But I think that that's just how history works,
It is. It very much is.
Yeah.
Celina, how about you? What comes next?
Yeah, so I'm in the very early planning stages, but basically, ever since I was little, I've always wanted to maybe make some sort of comic. I was just telling Grant this on the ride over here, but like when I was little, I used to want to be a mangaka, so like a manga artist, because I would reproduce like characters from Pokemon and stuff. But yeah, I've always been interested in comics. I love Calvin and Hobbes, Garfield, and so yeah, I just thought it would be cool to just maybe build a bunch of characters and build their story. So yeah, right now I'm planning out the characters, and I don't want to say hopefully, but yeah.
It will happen.
In the future, I almost said it again. In the near future, yeah, I'll start putting stuff out, probably on Instagram, because I'm just most comfortable on Instagram as a platform for showing my work. So yeah, might start putting stuff out on Instagram more.
That sounds awesome. And there are a lot of artists out there now doing things like webcomics, and I mean, this started closer to like 20 years ago, but things like webcomics, and we have so many different platforms now to share them on. You don't necessarily have to go and create a website like you used to have to. So I think that sounds fantastic. And I know some artists now that are releasing comic, like, it's not I don't know if you call it a novel or what you call it, but they had been doing comics for several years now, and now they're starting to come out with published books of those comics, and they're fantastic.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah.
Well, thank you both for joining me today. This has been fantastic.
It's been a lot of fun.
For anyone who's looking for a copy of Little Jack of All Trades, you can check down in the description below for links to both the hardcover and the paperback. on Barnes & Noble or on Amazon.